Namaskar, RVD here. A very warm welcome to my YouTube channel. We are in our playlist Programming in C Sharp. This is video number 13 where I'm going to introduce to you to control structures. Okay, so let's start with the video. To start with, first, as we know already, as we have done it already in many other languages, there are three broad categories or types of control structures, that is sequential, conditional, and iterative. Okay, out of that, sequential is the one which is by default present. After every line or statement gets executed, it goes on sequentially, so there's nothing to be specified separately, and hence we are directly starting with conditional control structures. So this video is dedicated to conditional control structures. So we have if else, we have nested if else ladder, or switch case. Okay, if you have already followed my other playlist like C programming and the various fundamental concepts of that, this was already covered over there, but I'm specifically covering it here again, so the people who are following directly C Sharp playlist will not miss anything. Okay, so let us have a quick understanding of what all these control structures are. We'll look at the syntax and maybe how exactly the flow goes for each one. And then for the further videos, we will be looking at some good examples, programming examples of these different types of conditional control structures. To start with, we have if statement. Let us look at the syntax of if statement. So we'll have if, let's say some condition. Just for simplicity, I'll be writing C1, C2, C3 like this. So if condition, then we'll have some set of statements. It could be one S1 or it could be multiple statements. Again, the rule of brace is very clear. If it's a single statement, even if you don't put brace, it's okay. But if it is more than one statement, you have to have the enclosed braces. Okay. Now, how exactly it flows? If the condition is true, then the set of statements related with if will be executed. Otherwise, it will be skipped. So if you have to look at the flow diagram, it is very simple. So I would have if, let me write in short C1, which is a condition which would either be true or it would be false. So if it is true, the set of statements, it could be one or many, as I said, would be executed, and if it is false, they would be directly skipped and the control goes directly down by skipping this set of statements. Okay, so that is if statement. Let's move ahead. If else is quite similar. So it's like if we have, let's say, condition 1, then we have set of statements to be executed. Again, the rule of brace is same. Else, now else itself indicates when the condition is false. Then maybe I'll have a different set of statements to be executed. So if condition is true, then this set of statements, else this set of statements. In the if part that we have done earlier, if the condition was false, there was nothing that was being compulsorily kept. Okay, so if the condition is true, we had done something, otherwise we skipped it. Now here, if the condition is true, we have one set of statements. If it is false, we have other set of statements. Now this S2, which is the statements which are put in else, will be skipped if the condition is true. So it's like either or type. Okay, so let's look at the flow diagram. So if C1, now if C1 is true, we have one set of statements S1 and the control is going to come down. But if the condition is false, we have other set of statements, let's say S2 as we have mentioned. So that will get executed and then the control comes out. So it's either this or this depending on the value of the condition, either it's true or false. So it is if else statement. Now when we have if else within if else, so what is nested if else? It is if else within if else. Okay, so when we have this particular concept, it's called as nested if else. Let's look at the syntax. So if C1, okay, if condition 1 is true, then I am going to enter in this, which itself will contain if else. So I'll check condition 2. If that is true, then S1 else S2. Okay, now this is when the condition 1 is true. Again, we can have braces here which I am not putting. Else If condition 3 is true, then S3, else S4. Okay, so mainly broadly depends on C1. If C1 is true, it's going to go to this if else, and then it decides whether S1 or S2 depending on C2. If C1 itself is false, it's going to go here, and whether S3 or S4, that depends on C3. So if I try to give you a flow diagram, I need to be a bit compact. So if C1 is true, we have something. If C1 is false, we have something. So if C1 is true, we go for C2. Okay, again C2 is true or C2 is false. If C2 is true, we have S1. If C2 is false, we have S2. But whether we'll go for this or not depends on the value of C1. If C1 is true, we are coming here. If C1 is false, then we go not for C2, but we go for C3. And if C3 is true, we go for S3. Or if it is false, we go for S4. And then we can join this. This is how the flow diagram would look like. Okay, currently I'm going ahead. You can very well pause the video here, and you can very well try to follow how exactly the syntax is fitting into this particular flow. Any doubts, any queries, you can very well put it in the comment box. Let's move ahead. Let us look at the ladder. Now, the nested was one into the other. Ladder is one after the other. So it's like more towards going into the same single flow. So if C1, I'm not putting braces now because it takes a lot of space, but you know the rule. If C1, then I'll do S1. Else, if it is false, I'll check for another condition C2. If that is true, then S2. If that is also false, I'll go ahead with C3, then S3. It can go on. I'm just finishing here. So it'll go for S4. So you can see it forms like a ladder. Okay, so that is if else ladder. It is not nested into each other, but it is flowing one after the other. So we can very well have, maybe let me be a bit rough. If C1, S1, okay, sorry, true, S1, and it goes down. If it is false, okay, it's going to check for C2. If C2 is true, we have S2. If C2 is also false, sorry, we have if C3. If C3 is true, then S3. And if C3 is also false, then by default we have S4. And we can combine all these things together. I guess this is enough for getting the idea of if else ladder. Fine. So first check one. If it is true, then you do S1 and that's it. The remaining part is going to get skipped because everything is in else. If this is false, then it goes for the second, then it goes for the third. So it's like being user interactive, you know. If at all you're getting it, it is quite similar to switch case. So depending on which case it maps with, it is going to go for a corresponding body. So I'll be going for the next switch case only. The syntax of the switch case would be a bit different because the language provides the syntax. But if you look at the flow, it's going to be same. So what happens internally would be same. So let me tell you, I'm not going to draw the flow diagram again. You will understand that even though the syntax is different, the flow remains same. So let's go ahead with the last one, that is switch case statement. So switch is a keyword and switch will have some expression. Now this expression can have multiple values, you know, like the condition 1 would result into true if maybe a variable has some value. It's like that in the earlier one. So similarly, expression will have some value. Now that values are kept in these labels. So let's say, let me write a general case. Label 1, I'll have this body. Case label 2, I'll have this body. Case label let's say N, I'll have this body, okay, and maybe the end of switch. Now let me go step by step because I'll be adding certain things here. So if the expression is evaluated, if it matches with the first label, this case is executed. If not, second label. If not, third label. If not, dot 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 up to label N. Now what exactly is added here is, after every case we are ideally supposed to give break. Okay, that means if that particular case is executed, the control should come out of switch. Otherwise it will do a kind of a free fall from one case to the other if there is no break. So break is required. Here also we can have a case called default. Okay, so for which we don't have to write case keyword. So default is a by default case. If it doesn't match with anything, it will come to default. And in C#, you also require to put a break after the last case as well. Let me tell you, that's the basic difference, okay, of C# with the other languages, previous languages. The last case, let that be a default or any other case with some label. The last case never required a break because anyways after that it's going to come down or after the block. But in C#, we do require break after the last case as well. Okay, switch in C# has got a lot of other facets as well. Okay, so maybe this is not going to be a correct place in time for going into the depth of switch, but currently you can very well try to equate it with the if-else ladder. You can see here also it checks one by the other labels or with the value of expressions. If the first label matches, ideally it's going to skip the remaining cases and it's going to come out. If not, goes for the second, goes for the third. So if you just visualize how exactly the switch case works internally, you would come up with the similar structure as we had used for if-else ladder. Okay, so that was it. So we had introduced control structures in this video. We had seen three types: sequential, conditional, and iterative. That's the basic categories. Sequential is nothing to be specified separately, so we directly jumped into conditional control structure. And in this video we had introduced conditional control structure with the syntax, with the flow. We've covered if statement, if else, nested if else ladder, and switch case. Okay, when we'll go ahead, we'll have more videos which will cover up the programming examples to give you more clear idea about these control structures. Once we done enough on conditional control structures, then we'll jump on to the iterative or looping control structures. Okay, but the current video was about conditional control structure, and that's it from my side for this video. Thank you and wish you a very happy learning.